Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Delinda Collier, Dean of Graduate Studies at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you for not just one, but two of our wonderful SAIC alums, internationally renowned artists Wafaa Bilal and Bana Kattan, Curator and Associate Head of Exhibitions at Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. Tonight's conversation is on the occasion of the artist's first major survey, Wafaa Bilal, Indulge Me, which just opened at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago February 1st and is on view through October 19th. We are so thrilled to host this program in partnership with the MCA. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, SAIC's Visiting Artist Program hosts a series of public talks by internationally recognized artists, designers, and scholars to expand our thinking about contemporary art and culture. These programs serve as a critical resource for the SAIC community, as well as our extended audience, which I think a lot of you are tonight. We are honored to welcome Wafaa and Bana back to SAIC, and I would like to thank them for sharing their extraordinary work with our community. Before we get started, please silence your cell phones at this time, and note that video recording of this lecture is not permitted. At the end of the conversation, we will have time to take 3 or 4 questions from the audience before the program concludes at 7:30 p.m. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and our staff will come to you with a microphone. And if you're posing a question, please keep it concise so we can get to as many as possible. Thank you. So introducing Wafaa and Bana this evening is Daniel Quiles, my dear colleague in the SAIC Art History, Theory, and Criticism Department. So please welcome Daniel to the podium.
Thank you, Delinda. I echo her remarks that it's great to see this room full for this event. It's an honor to introduce our guests tonight. Dr. Wafaa Bilal is an artist and arts professor in the Department of Photography and Imaging at Tisch School of the Arts, New York University. In 2008, the Chicago Tribune named him Artist of the Year. He was named one of Foreign Policy's 100 Leading Global Thinkers of 2016, and in 2019 received an honorary PhD, Doctor of Performance from DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana. His art is featured in the permanent collections of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Photography, and Mataf, Arab Museum of Modern Art, Doha, Qatar, among others. Bilal's art is not merely political, but also intensely personal. In 1992, he arrived in the United States as a refugee, having fled the US's devastation of his home nation of Iraq during the Gulf War. In 2001, he moved to Chicago to pursue his Master of Fine Arts at SAIC. His subsequent work was developed in the shadow of 9/11, rampant Islamophobia, and the atrocities of an Iraq war initiated on false pretenses, which in 2004, the atrocities of which in 2004 included his own brother, an early casualty of drone warfare. In response, Bilal's art embraced the novel, interactive tools of social media and networked gaming communities to focus audiences on Iraq's situation. The artist entangled his own body with these technologies, allowing users to shoot some 60,000 paintballs at him, or view a year's worth of video footage from the back of his head. Bilal's more recent work has been more reflective, taking stock of these momentous geopolitical events on Iraqi patrimony. An ongoing work, Canto 3, will launch a bust of Saddam Hussein into space, such that it gradually disintegrates on its way back to Earth, an allegory for tyranny everywhere. Bana Kattan is a curator and associate head of exhibitions at Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. After serving as curator at New York University Abu Dhabi Art Gallery, in 2018, she became the Pamela Alper Associate Curator at MCA Chicago. Over these past 6 years, she's organized solo exhibitions of Bani Abidi, Mona Hatoum, Mariam Tagavi, Mika Rottenberg, Orkide Torabi, and now Wafaa Bilal. Artists born in Pakistan, Palestine, Iran, Argentina, and Iran again, and Iraq, respectively. In this moment of nationalism and xenophobia, I want to thank Bana for her invaluable contributions to an insistently international program at the MCA, which point toward alternatives. Alternatives to bellicose geopolitics, alternative ways of seeing the world, alternative framings of our relationships with others, in the service of what Bilal calls a post-conflict world. Please give them both a warm welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. It's really nice when somebody looks at your bio and then does a little dance with it instead of just copy-paste. Thank you so much. I also want to thank School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Wafaa and I are both alums, and very proudly so. And of course, everybody that's here tonight. Look at you all. It started snowing again, so thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Bana, and thank you so much to the School of the Art Institute. What a great way to come back. Really, it is started here as a grad student, and then the first project, major project, start in the basement of the Art and Tech. And as I said, it's like a homecoming. And I look forward to this conversation with Bana.
You know, it's actually really nice to have the opening events for a show be a little farther apart than usual, because there's always this like postpartum that happens after you open a show and you're like, what am I supposed to do now? I've been so busy for 3 years. And so the fact that the talk happened, you know, the exhibition opened to the public on Saturday. And so the talk being on Tuesday is really nice. Anyway, so here we are, Wafaa Bilal. The exhibition title is Indulge Me. First major survey exhibition, an absolute honor to curate it. I've known Wafaa for 10 years-ish, maybe a little more. And this is not the first time I work with him, but this time was the most epic in terms of the work that we did together. And so aside from the exhibition, we also have a publication, which we have an image of on the slide because we like it so much. But as you can see, the exhibition goes from February 1st until October 19th. So you have a lot of time to go see it at the MCA Chicago. And we thought today we can just maybe go through each of the 5 works that are in the exhibition, talk a little bit about them. If you've never heard of Wafaa's work, and this is an introduction for you, that's totally cool. You'll get that, but hopefully also you'll get a little bit more. The questions that I've compiled for tonight are ones that I get a lot from people who do know his work. So the idea here is that there will be both a general and a deep dive. So here we go. First piece in the show is domestic tension. Wafaa, will you tell us a little bit about domestic tension?
Thanks, Bana. The inspiration is coming from a tragic event of the loss of my brother in 2004. And for the 3 years after that, I contemplated how is it possible to do an artwork that reflect the tragic of losing a brother to a drone attack, an American drone attack on our hometown of Kufa. 3 years later, the idea was born, and I needed to create an art project that's not didactic in its approach, but rather a dynamic piece that created an encounter and changed the role of the artist to a trigger of platform and bring a dialogue between people rather than imposing on them. I decided to move my living space into a gallery space, flat file galleries in the West Loop. And then I solicited the help of my colleagues, Ben Chain, Dan Miller, actually in the basement of the Art Institute, as I mentioned. And we built a robot. And the robot, on top of it, there is a paintball gun and then the control of that gun is being given to the people around the world, and the invite is shoot the Iraqi. With that in mind, what I wanted to do is to create a conflict zone within the comfort zone of United States, because the objective, it was not to impose on people political point of view, but rather to solicit an empathetic response, because it is an artwork that addresses political problem, and it is not a political art. Within that empathetic response, it creates an empathetic power, and hopefully it creates a tangible response in a political problem.
One thing I'll add is that this project was not just asking people on the internet whether or not they shoot or not shoot the artists. It was multi-platformed. So Wafaa, in addition to you being able to go online and control the gun and see the artist on live stream 24 hours a day, you were also able to chat with the artist. And more importantly, the chat was also available for people to chat with each other. And when I was reading all these chat logs, I realized that honestly, that was one of the richest parts of this experience, is seeing people interacting, talking to each other, and talking about their own experiences. In addition to waiting for Wafaa to do a third platform on this, in this project, which is the YouTube video logs that Wafaa uploaded every day. If he was late, people would be online waiting for this video. And so there was the element of chatting with the artist, seeing the artist live, and also watching him chat about the day and his narrative on what the emotional roller coaster was of that day. And I think that is way richer than shoot or not shoot. So I will add that, and I will ask you a question. The question I will ask about this piece is maybe the outcomes in general. You know, if you could talk a little bit about the PTSD that you experienced, but then also about the outcome on, let's say, your career.
Oh, absolutely. So PTSD is, comes from creating that miniature conflict zone. And many people think performance is a plane. That is not the case. In order to perform, you have to believe in what you're doing. And the reason for that, it comes back to the nature of a performance itself. Here, what I did was the target of the performance. The body has its own language. The body is in motion. In order to convince the people watching me, their body has to be convinced that the body in front of them is in stress. So that is the language was employed in this heart of this miniature conflict zone. So here what we're looking at is simply performance has something perhaps other medium does not have, which is immediacy. When we talk about other medium, this is not saying other medium is lesser to express. No. I chose performance for a reason. Performance needed to be in this and for this response. Usually, when we create an artwork, art is an assigned code to an object or performative act. Then it's mediated by the object itself or by the act. Then what if the object disappear? Then performance become unmediated. With unmediated become immediate. That hopefully solicit an empathy. With empathy, what we are and what I was after is to solicit the empathetic response and then change.
Perfect, thank you. Next piece in the exhibition, well, actually, it's not the next piece in the exhibition, but next piece we're going to talk about. We chose to make the discussion today chronological in the artworks versus the exhibition is not necessarily chronological, is the piece Virtual Jihadi. Virtual Jihadi is an internet cafe that houses the work Virtual Jihadi, which is a video game. And so you'll see in this internet cafe, BTW, this says internet, for those non-Arabic speakers. But you'll see in the internet cafe that there are 4 stations where you can walk into the exhibition and sit down and play the video game Virtual Jihadi. One of the 4 is purposely not working. There's an out of order sign.
That's what happened in old days of internet cafe.
Yeah.
Probably half of the room does not know what an internet cafe. They used to serve you internet by increment of 15 minutes. You would pay for 15 minutes of internet. You guys are lucky now.
Okay, Wafaa, tell us about the video game Virtual Jihadi.
Yeah, so Virtual Jihadi was a video game actually released by Al-Qaeda in 2005 called The Night of Bush Capturing, and the State Department was outraged because how is it possible Al-Qaeda released a video game, they call it a recruitment tool, they call it brainwashing, a terrorist simply training tool. Then I was really amazed by how is it Al-Qaeda produce a video game, a shooter that is you log into, you grab your gun, and within multi-level, eventually you hunt for President Bush, and then either you kill him or he kills you, you know. So, and I was intrigued. I downloaded the game, not knowing what to do with it. And then I researched, and apparently it was an Al-Qaeda game. It was an American game. It was created by a guy called Jesse Petrella in 2003, and the game was full of racism. All Iraqi soldiers, they all have Saddam face. In that game, very similar structure. You go and at the end you kill Saddam, and when you shoot the soldier, they speak nonsense Arabic, right? And the vending machine was Coca-Cola. So what did Al-Qaeda did? They changed the skin. From Bush, they put, from Saddam, they put Bush. From the American Iraqi soldier, they put American soldier. From the Coca-Cola machine, they put Pepsi. I guess they like Pepsi for some reason, so, or they're anti-Coca-Cola. Anyway, so I understood, which is a simple change of gesture, which is the skin of the game, outrage people. So I start developing the objective of the game, which is reverse the role of hunter and hunted, call on racism, and eventually what happened on the opening night at RPI, before we released it, after that, in 2010, I decided to hack into the game one more time. In that year, I decided to insert myself as a suicide bomber you could employ to go and assassinate President Bush. It was not a good idea. That's 2008. He was a seated president, and you know what happened? The FBI, the Homeland Security, the CIA, the Secret Service all showed up. It was an intense time. RPI hired 4 bodyguards around me, and I loved it. I thought all artists should have 4 bodyguards around them. It didn't last very long because then it was closed. One day, the show was closed down. It moved to the Center of the Independent Media, and it was closed again. And this time, the city of Troy told us the Independent of Century Media Gallery doors were 30 inches, not 34 inches. And they said it has nothing to do with the game. We said, right.
Okay, so the work was censored twice, even though they won't admit it the second time.
No, it was the doors. And thanks so much for making the doors so big.
Our cafe doors are way bigger. than necessary. But why did you choose to make yourself a suicide bomber in the video game, in your triple hacked version?
Thanks, Bana. That was actually intentional. Because, believe it or not, I was not after the 72 virgins. Seriously. I mean, damn, what would you do with that? I mean, sorry about that. Okay. Because seriously, how degrading for a culture to accuse an entire culture, to degrade it, to say people blowing up themselves for a 72 virgin. That's degrading. Not acknowledging somebody losing their lives in order a thought, maybe if I die, somebody could live better life than I am. But that's not it. Wait. When the US invaded Iraq in 2003, immediately released 1 million Iraqi soldiers. It created an utter chaos. 1 million Iraqi soldiers had nothing to do with Saddam, were released on their own, with no food to feed their family, no life basically. And then they become a victim of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda start hiring them for $20 to lay bombs in front of American tanks, $20. And then some of them start becoming suicide bomber in order to ensure their families. Iraq never had a suicide bomber. So that's when you have irresponsible government here, United States, attacking another culture and saying we are not for nation builders. Yeah, but you are for nation destroying a nation, but you cannot build it. That's why I chose to be a suicide bomber, but a virtual suicide bomber. And that's why when the government showed up and asked me, why did you do that? I give them the same answer when I ask, why do you betray us, degrading us in video game? And their answer always, it's a video game. So when they ask me, why are you a suicide bomber in this? I said, it's a video game. They let me go.
Okay, moving on to Third Eye. Similar to Domestic Tension, Third Eye was a durational performance that lasted just over 1 year, where Wafaa surgically implanted a camera into the back of his head. Go ahead, Wafaa, you want to talk about the piece?
So it was a very controversial piece, but it has multiple objectives. One of them is I left a lot of places without a record of my life. I left Iraq, chased by Saddam, for refusing to participate in a war against Kuwait. I left a refugee camp. All of these places I left with no record of my life. So the placement of the camera was intentional, storytelling. 2, the placement of the camera in the back of my head for any photographer in the room would understand the power of the camera or the power of photography, twofold at least. We program the image. How do we program the image? We program the image with our eyes. We program the image with our index. Then to arrive to an objective image, when you lose these two power, the image becomes as objective as possible. Then the third, which is the most important thing, it is the prediction of the future. That is when the body unify with the apparatus to predict the human future communication, which is, I wrote about it about 12 years ago, the idea of cognitive demand. What you guys have all in your hands and pocket now, devices called phones and smartphones, that's about to disappear in a matter of 3 years. Within 5 years, we're going to look at people and say, oh my God, that person still have a phone in their hands. So what is going to happen, everything going to be internal. And the term I coined is called cognitive demand. We are going to communicate on each other within our cognitive demand simply. That is the future of it. But between now and then, we are going to have intermediary devices, which is you're going to see in the goggle, and also you're going to see in glasses, and so on. The future is already here, and I know for sure some of people in this room have achieved it. I'm not going to tell on who, but I know some of these people work on this connection, which is the brain to the chip to the internet. It's already here, but we are afraid of it. So you guys going to get the intermediary step by having your glasses, goggle, when you are losing yourself in the virtual world of the communication. I'll stop here.
Okay, what he didn't mention was the idea of surveillance, obviously.
Yes.
As a Arab Muslim man living in the United States post 9/11.
And challenging the system by unifying the apparatus with the body, the very system that is surveilling us. So when the body is unifying, you cannot separate them.
Yes, and so returning the gaze where you're looking at him, but he's looking back at you, is a really important aspect. For the installation, we chose to install this piece in a very different way, a way that we've never installed before. You can see it's the first time in my career that I've ever hung a crooked monitor. It was hard to do for me, but we specifically chose to show the audience the exact image from the time and a time stamp, so time and date that you are in the galleries. So let's say you visit the gallery on February 16th at 5:31. You'll be seeing the image from February 16th at 5:31 from 2010, or technically in February it'll be 2011.
We sync 2010 to 2025. Every single image, minute by minute.
Okay.
And that was
Nobody needs to know that part. Okay, really quickly, the one thing I really want to add here, because Wafaa always refuses to answer this, but it's such a good story and people always want to know. In fact, my cousin is a doctor and she was like, what doctor agreed to surgically implant a camera into the back of this man's head? So Wafaa, I'm going to force you to tell the story because it's hilarious.
Who put this talk together? We agreed on conversational, not confessional. I want to know.
Sorry, not sorry.
Okay, we have a saying in Arabic, and we were taught when we were kids. اعمل بالممكن ولا تنسى المستحيل. Which means work with what possible. And what's the rest of it?
But do what's impossible.
Exactly. So after I shopped with just like so many surgeons, the answer was one. Always one. Remarkable, but I can't do it because of the insurance. Always the same. Everybody I go to. Then I put a great team together, a body modification team. It was in New York City. We were ready for it. One day before the implant, somebody leaked the story to the Wall Street Journal. And my team, for the lack of a better vocabulary, and let's make it an American vocabulary, freaked out. I think that's accessible one. And they told me, we have another team, you could try, but here's the catch. You have to be there tonight. Okay, so I am standing on Houston and Broadway, 5 o'clock in the evening, trying to make it to JFK on a flight to Los Angeles. If you are from New York, if you know from New York, this is before Uber, forget about it. Traffic, forget about it. And I find a copy. And I said, Habibi. He said, hello. And just like, okay, so I have to make it to JFK within an hour and a half. Wallahi, impossible. It's like, can you try again? It's like, nope. What if I pay you 4 times that? Yalla habibi, come in. We jump into the cab and we made it. We made it to the airport within an hour and a half. Here's another problem. The line to the gate is so long. And my assistant at the time, Christine O'Heron, she said, I got it. It's like, what are you going to do? It's like, she somehow had a pink bunny ears. She pulled them, put them on her head, and went through the line. We're getting married in Vegas. We're getting married in Vegas. And before I know, we are on the plane going to Vegas. We get married. We are in Los Angeles. And that night I got the implant.
See, I told you it's a great story.
Thanks, Bana. Now everybody knows.
All right. Next up, we have Wafaa's newest work. This piece was commissioned by the MCA for this show. And so while we were working on the show for 3 years, this was one of the, this and I would say the publication are the two main things that, we really genuinely needed the 3 years for. Lamassu in brackets in a grain of wheat. And the reason I say in brackets is because this is a sculpture that is made up of 2 artworks. In a grain of wheat is one project, and Lamassu in a grain of wheat is another. So, Wafaa, which one, maybe you should talk about in a grain of wheat first.
Again, fighting a system of oppression, this time another system of oppression. When ISIS attacked Iraq in 2015, they attacked Mosul, and they went after cultural icon, and the victim was the Lamassus, one of the Lamassus. Why it was significant to me and why I was heartbroken? Because I understand what it means when an enemy goes after cultural icon. Any culture lives and tell their stories through their icons. A culture embed their stories in its cultural production, and the cultural production become a reference. So when a new generation is born, the culture tell the new generation, this is how your ancestor has lived. When the reference is erased, then the enemy could erase, or when the icon is destroyed, the culture would be erased within 1 or 2 generations. I was heartbroken. So I start thinking in 2015, how is it again possible I could make my cultural icon safe, invisible to the enemy, yet accessible to generations to come? The answer was, I am going to collaborate with many people, including nature, scientists, museum, and my idea is first, who has these icons outside Iraq, and if they're accessible. And I found, luckily, 2 of them in the Met. The Met were very generous. They let me scan them. Each scan was 6 gigabytes. Next step is to call up on scientists. And the idea simply is, can we go to the next one?
It's not simple at all.
I'll explain it and people could judge, Bana, so. Can I take this Lamassu scan and insert it in a grain of wheat DNA? A grain of wheat DNA, that wheat that is domesticated in Mesopotamia by the Iraqis more than 6,000 years ago. And in order to do that, I had to take 6 gigs of information go around, shop the scientists and said, please, can we compress the information enough to do that? Luckily, it took 3 years, at least 3 tries, and then with so many institutions collaborating with me, and finally, the lamassu was inserted in the DNA of a wheat grain. Now, when you look at a field of grain, every one of these grain has a lamassu in it, accessible to generations to come, safe but invisible to the enemy.
So in the exhibition, we invite you to take a grain and plant it and help propagate this new type of seed that has the DNA inside of it. And in order for you to take a seed, you need to make eye contact with the lamassu, bow to it, and bend down and take a seed. So Wafaa, you mentioned that it took 3 tries. How did you know when it worked? And
well, the verification method is simply, I gotta simplify it. It's, imagine the DNA is a closet, just like where the DNA is safe. And then that closet has a room. There's the space where we put our scan in it. But we had to convince an E. coli to carry the code, open the door of that closet, and put the DNA there. So the DNA
and then
is
they
there.
killed off the E. coli, so it's safe.
Yeah, it's
by
safe.
the way, the seeds are safe.
I promise you. So then we grow it. Once we grow the wheat and produce the grains, we reverse engineer that. We take that and we pull the code out of it to see the code, the image exists inside. That's when we know every grain has the DNA and the image of the lamassu.
Awesome, thank you. Before I move on to the next slide, I'll tell you that the next one is the final work that we'll talk about. And it was really important to Wafaa to leave a lot of time for your questions. So please start thinking about them now. And we'll probably have a nice chunk of time for you. So hopefully we get to all of them today. So next up we have Canto 3. I'll note that this is kind of like a room with an installation of 3 works. And so we are referring to it as Canto 3 today, but it's actually, this section is made up of 3 different works. Canto 3 is the golden bust that you see here, and this is from 2015, and then there is 2 other works. There's a tiny work all the way in the back, which you will see a zoom-in image of shortly, and a wallpaper work, which you'll see in the next slide. So bear in mind, we're talking about them like they're one, because they feel like a series, but they are 3 individual works. So Wafaa, can you tell us the background of these, all 3 of these works?
Thank you, Bana. So when I lived in Iraq, Saddam, like any dictator, they like to have themselves or the image of themselves as an omnipresent. Literally, Saddam was on every corner as mural sculptor, and I remember we had to have his image in every classroom, in every room in our houses, and sometimes even the plate we eat from. So we say thanks to Saddam before we thank God. And the only place we didn't have Saddam to look at, it was the sky. There was a plan, that's the Ba'ath party, his party, come up with, which is to have a colossal sculpture of Saddam in gold and to geosynchronize it above Baghdad. So any Iraqi look up, they are going to see a shining star look up on us. And luckily, the plan didn't take place. Saddam was toppled, his regime was toppled. But anybody who existed in these places when oppression is constant, no, oppression doesn't disappear. And we have to have the process of healing. And to me, this is one of these projects I am working with, which is post-conflict. And with this project, one of the objectives is how can, as an Iraqi, deal with the residue of and the mental impact, the psychological impact that Saddam and his regime still have on the Iraqi mentality. And my thinking, what if, as a gesture, I honor that wish? I would put Saddam in orbit. But wait, it's very expensive to put that colossal sculpture in orbit, but also to put that size in orbit, that's kind of honoring the idea and honoring what he contribute, which, to be honest, nothing but destruction. Now I start thinking what Iraqi always think in the lens of comedy. Why? Because when you are in that moment of being always under attack and oppressed, to make sure you're still alive, you laugh. And then I start thinking, what if I see the entire Ba'ath project through a comic lens? What if I shrink Saddam? Instead of 20 feet high sculpture, I am going to shrink him to few inches. So we went to lesser sculpture. We went into CubeSat. And then from CubeSat, we went to a thumbsat. Then I thought, if I take the satellite and then equip Saddam with a selfie cam. Before he didn't have a selfie cam, but it would be really fun to have Saddam with a selfie cam and put him in orbit. I do not want to immortalize him. This is answering to the monument. What do we do with the monument when it's done its purpose? Then I decide, if I put him in the upper orbit, and some of you may know, think in the upper orbit stays forever, even when they stop functioning, and they become space junk, even though it's a good idea. But he's going to continue his destruction and hit other space junk and other satellites, just like, dude, you're done with destruction. So I decide to shrink him to 1 inch and then put him in the lower orbit, when after about 12 months of doing selfie reporting to us, gravity will pull him down. He will turn in the atmosphere to dust, and it will be a poetic ending to the dictator and to an oppressive aura. I have to ask you a question. Why?
Okay. So this is our little publication that we
Well, Bana,
worked on.
Wait.
I'll say the publication includes an essay by me, an essay by
But
Wafaa,
wait. I have a
and
question
also-
for
oh my
you. You
God,
can, I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Seriously. Look, Bana, I was really thrilled to work with you. I think I told you this many times. And in this pivotal time of our life, everybody knows here, and I hope everybody knows, our democracy in this state is at risk. And this show cannot come in better time because so many institutions shy away from art that address political issues. And I want to know two things. One is, why did you select these 5 works? And the theme, cannibalism, where did that come from?
Okay, so what Wafaa is talking about is that there is an overarching curatorial premise that the works are considered through. You don't have to get it at all to understand the works. As you can see, we did this whole talk without thinking about it. Each individual work really tells a story. But I wanted to kind of zoom out and look at Wafaa's work and his career and talk about it in a way that really threads through each of these 5 projects. And I honestly chose these 5 projects. I knew I wanted to start with domestic tension. So the exhibition begins, the first work that you see is domestic tension. That piece happened in Flat File, which was in Chicago. And so I wanted to make sure to begin the exhibition with a work that is from here and that really marked Wafaa's career. It was kind of a work that launched Wafaa's career. And so for sure I wanted domestic tension. And then the other 5 works are, crucial works in his practice, but they also really fell under this umbrella of cultural cannibalism. This is not a term that I came up with. At the time that I was thinking about this show, I was working on an acquisition at the MCA Chicago for an artist called Andrea Carlson, who's a Native American artist. And Native American artists have been talking about cultural cannibalism for a very long time. And I saw a lot of connections with the term and with the work that Wafaa was doing. And I kind of, I'm hoping that you can indulge me, which is where the title of the show comes from, in thinking about 4 kinds of cultural cannibalism in Wafaa's work. The first one is, in a way, the most obvious, thinking about the cannibalizing of the artist's body. So when you get to go online on the internet and shoot the artist's physical body, or you get to go online and look at an image that's from the back of his head. That is kind of the cannibalizing of the artist's body. It is the most obvious of the 3 types. The second one was thinking about how Saddam Hussein, as a ruler, as a dictator, really leaned in on the Iraqi history and culture to better himself and to better his image as a dictator. And so Wafaa was telling you how, there were billboards of him all over the place, and there was the image of him all over Baghdad. My favorite image, which is in the book, is one of him emerging from the Ishtar Gate. There's another image of him that he compares himself to an old Babylonian god. And so,
Hammurabi.
yeah, and so this man absolutely cannibalized Iraqi culture and history to platform himself. And the third type of cannibalism is the cannibalism of cultures throughout time, and countries and terrorist organizations throughout time on Iraq. Iraq is the cradle of civilization. Mesopotamia is considered the birth of humanity, and so thinking about the fact that the Met is who gave us access to the Lamassu to scan. Thinking about the fact that the Ishtar Gate is all over the world, including in majority Germany. And then also thinking about the fact that ISIS was able to saw off the face of the Lamassu because of the power vacuum that the United States left when they invaded the country, as well as virtual jihadi, which talks about Al-Qaeda being able to access the youth to turn them into suicide bombers, again, because of the power vacuum that was left in the country. And so that's the third kind of cannibalization. And finally, the fourth is you, the visitors. When you come to Wafaa's show, my hope is that you can now think of how we all consume the culture of the other, and how can we now do that more responsibly. And so that is the curatorial premise.
I want to end with one thought. I was recently watching Walking Dead with Sarah because she has not watched it before. And we were at, I love pop culture, and everybody who knows me know from Britney Spears to seriously every series, and I love Walking Dead. Season 7, episode 1, watch for this, really important. Negan get the people from Alexandria, brutally kill one of the members, corner Rick, and told Rick, "You think I'm gonna kill you? No. Because if I'm gonna kill you, you're worth nothing to me. I want you to go and plant and harvest for me so I keep benefit from you." And when I listen to Bana talking about cannibalism, it echoes what politicians in the culture here cannibalized the Native American, but it's gone, it's not producing. So what the culture and the politicians do to us, installing dictators to keep harvesting and producing for them. That is really sad, and it needs to end. Thank you so much.
We have time for a few questions. If you raise your hand, we'll get the microphone over to you. Please keep them concise so we can get to as many as possible. Elizabeth.
Hey, Wafaa. Thank you for the exhibition and also for the tour that you gave on Saturday. I just keep thinking we're 2 weeks into this second term, and to make it concise, I've just been thinking a lot about our responsibility as artists and not thinking about historical trauma of a dictator or a personal trauma, but how to organize now, and if you have any plans or anything that you can, as a political artist, on how to respond to the times.
Yeah, I think we have to start with the term political artist. I would have to say we have to rebrand. and we say we are artists addressing political issues. So we need to agree with that. Because when people say political artists, and I think that comes from people who are trying to degrade our art, So to me, I think with domestic tension allowed me to understand that is we creating something relational, right? If we define art as I said, is the idea of encoding an object or an act, then perhaps the hierarchy of our power as an artist change. We become a trigger of a platform. What we are after is to motivate, to engage people. So just like domestic tension is to trigger that platform of engagement. Just like Lala Su. Think about how many people, how many institutions were engaged to create that piece. 2015, ISIS destroyed the Lama Su. The Met got in. The Creative Cap. I was shopping around so many places for scientists to give me a hand with it, but we didn't have the capital, right? Then people start coming in to come together in order to resurrect that and tell the rest of humanity this is important. So what we do now is to trigger a platform. To me, I think the time when we embed the code in the object, it is over. Why is that? Because when we embed the code in the object, it becomes a statement, and it's no different than a political statement. When we trigger a platform, it becomes a platform of engagement, and the narrative belongs to everybody who participated in that, on that platform. From the scientists who give their expertise, to the museum who give us the platform, to the institution who give us the capital to do it, then it becomes a collective work to fight a system of oppression.
I'll say that because I read everything, because this is a survey show, the one thing that I did notice was that, Wafaa had said in the past that he believes that artists should hold up a mirror to society so that they can basically obviously see themselves for what they are. And then recently, in other interviews, he actually changed. He said, I used to say that artists are just supposed to hold up a mirror. But now, I believe they have to do more. They have to hold up a mirror and be the platform. And so
and
I saw that shift, I want to say like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
or a year and a half ago.
I used to say artists are mirror reflecting a social political condition. But perhaps now it's not enough. An artist has to be a mirror with consciousness.
Yes, that's what the quote was, yeah.
It's different. We don't interfere, but rather we solicit the response of people. We solicit their engagement. It's really urgent if you think about it. But it's not just politics. Think about the environment. Think about social justice. To me, if we start looking for a subject, we are doomed. The subject is us, is what we striving for, from an individual matter to the global matter. No artist should look for a subject, ever. Just happen, Iraq is my subject, because I was born there and it became a burden. It's not a burden, but rather a responsibility. And I think that's what every artist's answer is. You are the subject. You never should look for one.
Elizabeth.
Hello? Right here. Hi, Wafaa. Wafaa was my teacher a long time ago.
Oh my God,
Yeah, it's been
Eric,
a while.
oh
A lot
my
different.
God, you have a beard.
It's been a while.
I
mate.
love you, man. It's been a long time.
I love you too. This is Kismet.
You still doing a graphic or?
I'm here again.
Wow.
I'm here again. We'll talk, but I wanted to ask you a question about making the invisible visible, which I see in a lot of your work. I think she described it as like a sense of a type of cultural cannibalism. And as a black man in America, a black artist, a black designer, I find a lot of our culture is either commodified, flattened out, and in the last decade, I've watched that stridation happen even more, where there's like certain conversations don't seem to have the impact that they used to have because the language has been co-opted. And so I guess what I'm asking, because that's pretty heavy to say, I guess, but what I'm asking is, when we're talking about cultural coding, which is something I'm really trying to tackle right now, as an Arab, as an Iraqi artist, how do you navigate, because I want to ask you how do you navigate that tightrope of dealing with folks maybe being a little undereducated about how you're dealing with some of these subjects in a sophisticated manner?
So, one of the hardest things I had to go is writing an essay for the book. And I start recalling my practice. What dawned on me is how many people I alienated when I arrived here. Because I created work, I encoded it, and I was backlashing. And I unconsciously was operating in a mode of antagonism, but the wrong mode, right? Antagonism is fine when I employ it later in virtual jihadi, knowing I need to antagonize the people who actually alienated me. So I got under their skin to antagonize them and have them come out. But at the beginning of my practice, I lashed out because I was watching my own apocalypse, arriving from Iraq, from the comfort zone to the conflict zone to the comfort zone of United States. Watching the people around me had no psychological, emotional connection what I had to go through. The very people who are responsible for the destruction of my culture, I was outraged. And then what happened, the work I created is simply attacking the very people I won their empathy. I left New Mexico. I come to the Art Institute of Chicago. The first thing I was taught is interactivity. First thing you learn in interactivity, it's the code. There is something called the end state. The end state in every video game is the end state open or close, right? For people who don't know, when you play video game, it leads you to something determined. So if we create a statement to antagonize people, that's the outcome. But if we have in mind to create an interactive artwork, an encounter with an open-ended, with no end state, and giving agency to the people who are allowed to be on the platform to write part of the narrative, we are going to get tangible result to change whatever issue we're championing. And I absolutely believe in, because at the end, it's not just my cause. It is at the end what unifying us is the same thing, and the same thing only. We wanted to live in dignity in a safe place. The demagogue do not want us to do. And art could do it when politics trying to suppress us. Art, technology could lift the human spirit, but are we going to be the trigger of a platform to bring people together? That's the responsibility to me for the artist these days.
If I may, I have a much less positive answer. I mean, it's from a curatorial perspective, obviously. And poor Carla Acevedo Yates used to be my office roommate when I used to work at the MCA Chicago, so she heard me talking about this a lot. But I'll say that I'm going to be very corny and be on theme of the exhibition, but I'll say that, you know, I often feel like they want us. They want our work. They don't want us. And just, again, to be really corny, I'll remind everybody that if you are invited to the museum, but you don't have a seat on the table, that means you are for dinner. You are part of the meal. And so that is something that we need to keep working on.
Hi, thank you for such an indulging conversation. And I wanted to ask, for your own work, does it ever come to completion? As you talked about oppression, it never comes to an end. And I just wanted to ask, as an artist, if you ever dictate when your work comes to a completion, and if it does, what are some contributing factors? Yeah, that's my question.
Bana, that's to you.
I'm so sorry, I can't speak into the abyss. Can you
Curators
wave?
are all dictators.
Where is this person?
Trust me on that.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. You go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can you please repeat the question? Maybe decode it a little bit for me.
Yeah, I guess for your work to feel completed in its own state, I was wondering if does that happen in your own work? And if it does, what are factors that make you believe that it comes to a completion?
It's really great question, and I think, well, it's a term you set up, right? For example, there are sometimes arbitrary, and sometimes they are the code into it. For example, with domestic tension, we had to do a 30 days because the gallery shows our 30 days, right? So the work ended there, but luckily the work continued to contribute, right? Then, to me, then you have other work like the one that seems like it's never ending. It's Canto 3. We never got into that because it seems like it has its own life. Sometimes the work dictates that. To me, it's all about the objective, right? When we create work, some of us are calculated, and this is what happened when politically, socially engaged artwork. You have to have an objective. With an objective, you have to determine what platform, then you have to know who are your audience, and then what's the goal, right? With the goal, when you achieve that, the work ends. For example, when I started 168, which is another work to address post-destruction, post-conflict, and to get books from around the world to the Iraqi libraries who lost the books during the invasion of 2003, the objective was clear. Duration was not clear, right? So that determined by how fast we could collect the books. With encounters, you could really never say when the work is gonna end. For example, with the Lama Su, it started in 2015, and I was shopping for people to help. Many years passed by before I got the creative capital, a grant, and then the Met, and then their objective achieved. We got the scan, we got the capital to do it, and then we were waiting for the platform. When the platform was done, what we achieved, the scan put into the grain of wheat. What was missing is the physical representation of the project, and by talking to Bana, we come up with a new plan. Well, the Lama Su is always a cultural composite. It needs to be resurrected. And we work together to bring it back to life. But when you visit the museum, you're gonna see the seeds. It's like seeping or from the hoof of the Lama Su, as if the Lama Su walking and planting itself and saying, I'm here forever. So sometimes the project you plan change beyond your expectation, and thankfully is because of the people you work with, because you never have an end state. The more people you invite to work with, it's the more idea they contribute. Again, you have to have the open heart, the open mind. You have to welcome everybody because they become part of the project, because it becomes their narrative too. And at the end, they become a solution to the very thing, the very problem you're trying to address.
So if I was going to answer that question, I would actually answer it in a more individual way. So I'll tell you that, for example, Wafaa has very directly said that he's not going to do domestic tension performance again. It's done, same as Third Eye. It's had its moment, and now we're working with the archive of it. Yeah. Okay. However, I will tell you that none of these works are really actually over. Wafaa, sorry to tell everybody your personal business, but Wafaa actually still has PTSD from domestic tension. And he literally has a scar in the back of his head from Third Eye. And you know, the work that the Lama Su, for example, he is literally asking you to keep this seed alive by planting it and propagating it. Put wheatgrass in your smoothie, eat it yourself, and then you are part of the project. So I will say that while a lot of these projects seem like they're over, they really will almost never be.
Danny.
Hi, Bana, Wafaa. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful talk. I have a curatorial question for Bana. you started working on this exhibition at least 3 years ago, and so my question to you is how this curatorial narrative changed for you with what is going on today and the rise in Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate that we're seeing today that is mirroring what Wafaa experienced in 2003. So other than the fact that these works are still alive in Wafaa, they still apply to what we're experiencing today, and I think that must have changed your curatorial premise while you were doing this exhibition.
Thank you, Tala. This is my 9th exhibition at the MCA, and I will tell you for sure it is my hardest. Being Palestinian and working on a piece from 2007 that clearly showed the world how minimally we think of certain bodies and certain lives was so painful, and bless the team that worked on this book, who kept giving me extra time because my essay was so difficult to actually sit down and do. I genuinely took double as long to write this essay that I did at any time. And thinking about cannibalism while watching all of my people being murdered was really difficult. And with that, I also want to say something that I've been meaning to say since I sat down here, which is that every person wearing a keffiyeh today, thank you so much.
Bana, when I wanted to read your essay, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. These times seems like the time I woke up, and I start crying. Wallahi. I didn't know how you did that, but it's not just about the practice, it's how human you read the work and how beautiful you capture the moment. So I wanted to thank you for the essay, but also I wanted to thank you for giving the work the platform you deserve. When I thanked you last time, you said you should have the platform long time ago, and I remember telling you, don't underestimate the power of racism. So thank you.
We have time for one more question. Audrey.
Thank you so much for giving a talk here. I have a question about artistic expression. Given the myriad different influencing pressures that are suppressing various forms of expression, and given your history of not shying away from what are hot button issues, I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts on how you can balance the imperative of honest artistic expression with the knowledge of the possible dangers of that expression.
I never was afraid of it. You know, that's why I remember when the Ba'ath Party was asking me to put me on a spot. They walked into the classroom in Baghdad to put me on a spot, to make an example for me, to make me look like a coward, to go and volunteer. I said no. The reason for that, I absolutely believe life living in fear is not worth living. And I will end it with that.
Thank you, Wafaa. Thank you, Bana. Thanks everybody who came tonight.
Well, thank you so much, everybody.